Okay, good evening, folks. It is Tuesday, April 26th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and we're in the council chambers of the city of Platteville, and I am calling the regular meeting of the Common Council to order. Candace will start with roll call.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Todd Casper.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here. Okay, as we begin tonight, we're going to start with a presentation by our city manager, Adam, on assessments. Many people have, probably all people, I don't know, have gotten a notice of assessment in the mail. And I know that there have been many questions. Adam, I believe we also have people on hand tonight from Accurate Appraisal, our appraisal firm too. But take it away on making sense of assessments.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do, obviously, is, as I was one who got the notification in the mail of property changes and looked at it and said, oh, okay. I think just like everybody else, as far as staff and also as council members, you have probably within the last week heard from constituents about the concerns. So what our hope with this is that this is obviously out on our website. And this will be brought onto YouTube. So our hope is that we can try to do this to, it may not necessarily answer all the questions, but at least give a little bit of a guideline for you as council members and also the community as a whole to kind of grasp, what exactly is they're making sense of the assessment process. So just to kind of go through some of the information. So what obviously everybody has seen is in March of 2022, Grant County home prices were up 23.6%. compared to last year, selling for a median price of $185,000 according to Redfin.com. I just kind of did a Google search, kind of looking at different things, and that was pretty standard across the board from what I saw from sites. So obviously, with the most recent notice of assessment letters going out to property owners, many have voiced concerns about the rising assessments. So what can you do about that? Well, the open book process is currently being done. Can be done via phone until noon on May 24th, 2022. If you have questions regarding your personal property assessment, you can either email personal property at accurateassessors.com, or you can call them at 920-749-8098. Then obviously there will be the board of review process that occurs on May 26, 2022, from noon to 2 p.m. So one of the big things we kind of saw was there was a lot of kind of social media feedback and also questions I think that many council members and staff got, that the reason their assessment went up was because this was a direct result of the fire station that is occurring, and also because of the proposed school district referendum that is occurring. That is definitely not the case. So wanted to make sure that we understand what this is. So assessments is actually a process that is in Wisconsin. It's regulated by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. So it's not something that as a city, we can just automatically decide, all right, we're going to raise, we're going to do a reassessment of everything. It is a process that is defined by the Department of Revenue as well as state statutes. So state law requires that assessors are certified by the DOR. Their certification involves an exam that tests their knowledge of appraisals and assessment law and administration. The assessors are also required to follow an assessment manual, which is issued by the Department of Revenue. And Wisconsin does have an annual assessment process. So this means that each year assessment is a new assessment. The assessor may change your assessment because of building permits or sales activity, even if the assessor did not inspect your property. So one of the big things is under state law, under section 70.05 of the Wisconsin statutes, it is required that each municipality must assess major classes of property within 10% of a full value in the same year, at least once with a 5-year period. So what you can see here on the PowerPoint presentation is that in 2021, we had a total assessment of 88.52. So obviously we are below the 90% that is required by state statute. So what happens is every year this kind of goes on and it benchmarks where each of our classifications are. So residential, commercial, agricultural. So as you can see in 2021 for residential, we had a ratio of 90.79%. So we're pretty much right at that cusp of, yes, we're in compliance, but we're kind of teetering. So as you can see, commercial, we were not. So overall then looking at the other areas, that dropped us below. So as this says, if a city does not comply after 6 years, the state then is required to conduct a supervised assessment. So in 2028, the city underwent a full reevaluation to bring assessed values into compliance after the commercial property class was out of compliance for 4 years. As a result, all property classes were in compliance for 2018 and 2019. However, in 2020 and 2021, The commercial class dropped out of compliance at less than 90% of the full value as determined by the DOR. That again was the 85.41% that you saw on the last slide. So according to City Assessor Accurate Appraisal, this is because of volatility in property values over the past couple of years. Accurate reports seen ratios in some municipalities change more than 12% in 1 year. In 2022, Accurate will perform an interim market update, which will bring property class values back into compliance. So an interim market update is a type of reevaluation, but does not involve physical inspection of every property. Just as in a regular maintenance year, the assessor may inspect properties which changed hands or filed a building permit. During an interim market update, the assessor will look at the assessed value of all properties in the city and will use statistical data, sales data, and any other information that may impact values to determine if the assessed value needs to be adjusted. So kind of want to get into a little bit of how assessments determine taxes, because that's obviously the number one question. So many taxpayers obviously fear that a higher assessment will automatically mean higher property taxes. By contrary to popular belief, higher assessments do not guarantee that it will be a higher property taxes. In fact, it's even possible for an individual's assessment to rise and property taxes to fall. And we'll get into that in a little bit here. This can better be seen by understanding the role assessments play in figuring property taxes. So again, this is kind of very broken down in bare bones, but property assessments are used to apportion the total property taxes to be collected, i.e. what we talk about when you hear about the tax levy. So whenever we talk about that, that's kind of what that means among a community's property owners. An owner's share of the total tax levy is the same as the property share of total assessed value. So for example, if an individual property's assessed value represents 1% of a community's total assessed value, the owner will pay 1% of the community's property taxes. When the tax levy remains unchanged, an individual tax bill can only go up if the property bill tax grows sufficiently in value to represent a larger part of a community's total valuation. And this can only happen when an individual assessment increases faster than the total community assessed values. And we'll get into that kind of here in a second. So what I looked at is a lot of this information I was able to pull from the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. So they actually came up with kind of a sample to try to explain assessments. So they created a fictional town. They called it Smallville, Wisconsin. So the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance created a mythical Wisconsin hamlet to help individuals understand assessments better. So for example, during 2022, there were 4 homes in Smallville, each valued at $50,000. Total assessed value in the community was $200,000. So you take the 4 homes times the 50,000, that gets you the $200,000 assessed value. So each of the 4 owners, A, B, C, and D, own 1/4 of Smallville's property value. So each pay 1/4 of the property taxes. So to kind of explain it, to illustrate, owner A has a home assessed at $50,000. It accounts for 25% of Smallville's total assessed value of $200,000. The total property tax levy is $8,000. So owner A, since they have 25%, their share is $2,000. And so again, this is where it kind of gets into municipal finance, where we talk about the assessed value times the tax or mill rate yields the taxes due. So in this example, what they explain is Smallville has not been reevaluated since before 2018. So state law requires assessments by class of property, example, residential or agricultural, to be within 10% of the market value once every 5 years. So because Smallville was not, the village board hired an assessor to revalue the 4 properties in the community. As a result, Smallville's total assessed value increased 100% from $200,000 to $400,000. So owner A's assessment jumped 80% to $80,000 from $50,000. Assessments on the homes of owner B and owner C doubled, going from $50,000 to $100,000. And owner D assessment rose $140,000 to $120,000 on their home. So having gone through a revaluation before, owner C was less anxious. Owner C knew that the total 2023 tax levy was not going to change. She studied the new 2020 assessment roll and shared her findings with her neighbors. So there was a tax cut for owner A. Assessment climbed 60%, but that increase was less than the 100% jump in Smallville as a whole. So therefore, their share of the village total assessed value fell from 25% in 2021 to 20%, 80,000 versus 40 in 2022. So said owner C to owner A, the total tax levy is going to stay at 8,000. You now own 1/5 of Smallville's total property value, so you will pay 1/5 of the taxes. So owner C scribed 1/5 or 20% of 8,000 is 1,600. Your tax bill will drop from 2,000 to 1,600. So that's a direct example showcasing that even though their assessment went up, they actually will see a reduction in their overall tax. Then there's going to be the instance where there will be no tax change. So owner C turned to owner B. Our 2023 property tax bill are going to be the same as last year, $2,000. Owner C told them. Owner C explained that both their homes increased 100% in value, the same increase as the village, and added our homes still each represent 25% or 1/4 of Smallville's assessed value. Because the total tax levy will still be 8,000, we each will pay $2,000, the same as last year. So there was no change for those. Unfortunately, owner D did see a tax increase. So owner D's home was now assessed at $120,000, 140% higher than the previous $50,000. Their assessed value increased faster than the total value for the village. So they had 140, whereas the total assessed value was 100%. This means their home now represents 30% of Smallville's valuation compared to 25% from last year. It also meant that they would pay 30% or $2,400 of the $88,000 tax levy as opposed to 25%. So they went from $400 increase. So owner D obviously was not pleased, but they knew their riverfront location meant that their home would sell for more if it was put on the market right away. So again, as far as the assessment goes, this is overall the city tax rate that has been done kind of over from 1998 to 2022. As you can see, there's been fluctuations back and forth, and a lot of that does have to do with the assessment. So when the assessment is done and that overall has a change to the assessed value of the city, we then as staff and also as the council then have to look at how that impacts the overall finances of the city. And that potentially, as we talked about, is kind of three scenarios that could play out for property owners. Either they will see a reduction, they're going to see the exact same, or if because of the fact that their property due to market rates has now increased more than what the actual assessed value is, they're going to see an increase. And again, one of the concerns that I think we heard from a lot of constituents was, well, okay, because right now, as we saw, the market rate is up 22%. What happens if it goes in the reverse direction? Does that mean then that the assessment continues to stay where it is? No, that means when we do a reevaluation, that plays into it, and the assessed value for those homes then could go down, thusly reducing somebody's taxes. So this, again, because of the fact that it is a state statute, we're required to do this within every 5 years. We try to do it pretty much almost every year so that we continue to be in that, constant compliance range. Yep.
So speaking of that.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Oh.
If you're going to speak, you need to come to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Yep.
Oh, it's on. I'm Kyle Cabe. I'm the account manager for Platteville. I work for Accurate. So to allude to what he's saying, when market rates are going up and up and up, that 90% is where your compliance lies. Now, if the market starts to drop, there's 110% on the other side where your compliance lies. So if you get out of there, you have 5 years to get back. So it goes the same way. So we would lower to get you into compliance that way.
So compliance is between 90 and 110%,
Correct.
plus or minus 10%
Yep.
of 100.
Yeah. So, I mean, we couldn't keep you at those numbers if the market's continuing to go down. It's just not what compliance would allow. So we would make an adjustment lower.
So again, what this slide shows is exactly what was pulled out of the budget presentations that we did, kind of showing what the tax rate has been over the last 5 years. And as you can see, there have been some ebbs and flows. So in 2019, there were some changes that were done that very well could have been because of either a TIF district closing or could have been because of, as we talked about, the reevaluation. So with that, that does change the overall tax rate. So overall, just to kind of summarize, higher assessments, again, do not automatically mean that there's going to be higher property taxes. The key, as we talked about, is the rate of increase in a property's assessment relative to other properties. If the total assessed value in a community rises 10%, and if the tax levy remains unchanged, an increase greater than 10%, as we talked about, will mean a tax hike, while an increase smaller than 10% potentially will mean a tax reduction. Ultimately, as we heard in our kind of work session, cost increases that to continue to run city operations and services is what results in a higher property tax levy. It is more expensive to continue to do the day-to-day operations. It's not necessarily higher assessments that will directly affect the property tax bill. So when taxpayers kind of review this information, the goal hopefully is that they'll be able to view updating of assessments is really to ensure tax fairness, that we're ensuring that those properties are being assessed at the value that truly they are represented in the city. So right now we have accurate appraisal here. So what we thought would be, we would allow them to kind of come to the podium. And if you guys as council members or anybody has any questions, that's kind of why they're here, is to talk about anything that you guys would like to know.
Okay, so Kyle and Colin, if you guys want to come to the microphone in case anyone has any questions relative to assessments. Questions?
General question, do you have an office here in the city hall? And if so, what hours do you hold in that office?
We do not have an office in City Hall. We do field work here. We can be here. We were asked to come to the meeting. We drove down here. Our main office is in Menasha, Wisconsin.
But you were here for open book on Tuesday, the 19th?
Correct.
Okay, so you do come to Platteville. You don't do everything remotely.
Right. Yep. We would come and do field work, board of review, open book here.
Back when we renewed the contract, we did an RFP for assessor services. Accurate was our assessor before the RFP. The results of the RFP led us back to Accurate again. When I came on board many years ago in 2017, there was at that time an office for the appraiser, for a representative from Accurate, and they did come down to the city. I forget how frequently, once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month. They would sit there in an empty office for 4 or 5 hours and nobody would come and see them, and then they would go back again. And this was consistent from month to month. And so as a part of negotiating the contract for a lower cost, it felt a better use of taxpayer money not to pay the assessors to come to the city hall and not have anybody come and visit them, but rather have them be available by phone or by email, and then to come down on an as-needed basis. And so that was the contract that we agreed to.
And that begs the question, Adam did give your phone number. If I were to call in, what would be a typical amount of time that it would be before someone would call me back and work with me?
If you don't get an answer right away, we do have 3 live assessors that answer the phone. Sometimes they're busy. And if you leave a voicemail, our standard turnaround time is 48 hours. It normally doesn't get to 48 hours. It's normally 24 hours. So that would be the standard turnaround time if you don't get an answer right away.
Okay, I see that there was also an email address provided. So would you say email or phone? Or is one faster than the other? Is one, or?
I wouldn't say one's necessarily faster than the other. If you call and get one of the 3 live assessors, you're already talking to a live assessor in person. So that eliminates some of the back and forth. So I would say phone calls probably better, but I mean, we have just as many phone calls as emails as well. So we're pretty good at both.
Plus, I suspect that you're Monday through Friday in the office. You're not in the office Saturday and Sunday, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And of course, some people have to deal with Saturday and Sunday. So email may make sense to them. Ken?
Not too long ago, a resident of the city asked me about some properties, and he was asking about what those properties paid as taxes. As a council member or as a citizen, can I go and contact you and find out what those properties are being assessed at and how much they're paying for taxes?
All of our assessment information is online. So if you go to our website, you can go to the city of Platteville and you can type in any address and see what they're being assessed for. If you go to the county website, you can then see the taxes on the county website for any property.
The Grant County web portal would would give the, and it gives the tax history too.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's the Grand County Tax Land Records website is what you can click on, and that allows you to you can search by property, you can search by name, you can do whatever, and it pulls up. You can then see the tax information for, I think, at least 2 or 3 years.
But some people are not familiar with this way that it can be done. So that's the problem for some.
And they can call our office and we can help them through it. We'll gladly help them.
Okay, other questions?
I guess I have one for you. The only thing I've heard from people in my district is questioning the, what is quoted here is a 23.6% increase in the value of their property and how we came to that number. Who's redfin.com? That's quoted here. I mean, so where do we go with this? How are you guys deciding that, we're sitting at 23.6% this year and perhaps, 63% next year? Where are we getting these numbers?
So the numbers that we get all the sales from the state. And then we go through and verify the sales. If you sold property to your brother, that's not a valid sale. It wasn't on the open market. So we look at all the valid sales and then we boil them down to similar style houses, similar areas of Platteville, everything like that. And then we look at those in compared to their assessed value. So if we see a house that we have assessed at 200,000 is consistently selling for 250,000, we'll make that adjustment. So that's where that comes from. According to state statute, we're beholden to the prior year's sales, and in revaluation, the prior 2 years sales. So with the market going up like it is, that's where you're seeing the big increase. Now, if you guys do a revaluation in say 4 to 8 years from now, and that market's gone down, it would be the same way. We'd look at the previous year's sales based on assessments and then make an adjustment to show what the market's doing. So you may see a decrease of 10% or 20% the next time.
Historically, do you recall any time that we had a decrease like this occur in your lifetime? We've been doing this job.
I know, I mean, I wasn't with Accurate, but when the housing market crashed the last time, 08, 09, right after that, there were a bunch of assessments lowered because house prices, the houses that were selling weren't selling for nearly what we had them assessed at. So then you see them lowered.
And Todd, Adam came up, you were the one that found the 20.
Yeah, so that was just, I pulled that site just because thinking, what I always try to do is think, okay, if I'm, just trying to look for information, I went on Google and I did Grant County home prices. And that's where if you kind of look at like realtor.com, this was one. Again, I can dig into further if we truly want to see where that number is, but that's just more of kind of providing you a little bit of, okay, this is where if somebody's going out and just trying to do their own research, what would be something that they would see? Obviously, as then what we talked about is there are state statutes that, just as they indicated, there are specific guidelines that they have to follow with the DOR. So that number is going to fluctuate between whatever the actual requirement is from the DOR and state statute guidelines.
Average increase for residential was 23.04. So that number is pretty close. So that shows you in their study that they did of the same sales and our study, how close that number actually is.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the payment in lieu of taxes. Can you tell me the number of properties that are working that way as far as paying anything on taxes in the city of Platteville?
That information we wouldn't have. We just look at sales and put an assessment number. The taxes, the collection of taxes, we don't have anything to do with that.
You don't, so if somebody is just given a payment to the city and so forth, to the county and school, you don't know that.
Yeah, we wouldn't know that. No.
Well, there, in the past, my experience has been that some people have asked for a payment in lieu of taxes. I know there's some in the city of Platteville that do it that way. So I'm just trying to find out how I could determine or find out a total number of properties like that.
Adam, this would be publicly held property, or
It would
property
be-
held by nonprofits?
Yes, it would be
Oh, exempt
property that
property.
is
Exempt
exempt from
property.
Okay.
property taxes. So you can't, as a citizen, you can't just choose to make a payment in lieu of taxes instead of paying taxes. I mean, if you are subject to tax, you have to pay the tax. But if you're a nonprofit or if you're another kind of exempt property, you can choose to make a payment in lieu of taxes. And in 2021, the only pilot payment we received was from UW. A UWP payment.
Actually, it was the Real Estate Foundation, not.
Yeah, I'm looking at
UWP.
what was listed, so I thought it was probably the Real
Real
Estate
Estate
Foundation, but it doesn't say
Real
that.
estate?
The UWP Real Estate Foundation, they own the Residence Hall called
Tree Commons.
Roundtree Commons at the roundabout on Route at Marquee. And they are an exempt property. So when that property was built, there was a negotiated payment in lieu of taxes. But that's the only one left. Jenner Tower used to be owned by a not-for-profit of some type, but that property was sold and that property now pays taxes just like any other property.
Well, what about, there's another property across the street from Jenner Towers. And in my recollection is that they were doing a pilot.
You talking about Ruxton?
No, I think he's talking about the Hearthside Apartments.
Okay,
They're owned by the International Order of the Odd Fellows, IOOF, I believe.
they were making a payment. In 2020, they made a payment of $1,700, so not a very large payment. I can look into whether or not there was a change of ownership or if they're no longer exempt. Or if there was any kind of, I don't know if there was an agreement that was signed or whether that was just a voluntary payment, but we did not receive a payment in 2021, but I'll look into that and see why.
Okay, thank you.
So unless the payment was negotiated in advance on an exempt property, perhaps when the property was built or something like that, whether they make a payment in lieu of taxes, if there is no prior agreement, is kind of at will.
Yes, I would
They
say
can
so.
do it if they want, or if they don't want, they don't have to.
Correct.
As far as the exempt properties go from our point of view, they have to fill out state prescribed paperwork, listing their 50C or 501c3, everything like that, why they qualify for exemption. There's certain sections that they have to hit for them to qualify. We review every one of those to see if they actually meet those before we list them as exempt.
Questions? Thank you for joining us. And I guess we're going to move on with our agenda and you guys can go back to Menasha or wherever.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Adam, thank you for you and Nicola for putting this together. And as Adam said, it is on our website now as the PowerPoint.
Yep.
And also, of course, Jody has just recorded it. So if you want to not read it, but listen to it, you can do that too. All right, let us move on then to the item on our agenda called consideration of consent agenda. Tonight, there are several items on this agenda. These can all be approved in a single motion and vote due to their routine nature. Please indicate if you'd like separate discussion or action on any of these. So first of all, we have the council minutes from April 12th and from the special meeting on April 19th. We have payment of bills. We have appointments to boards and commissions and committees. And tonight, Colette has provided you with the council member appointments for the coming year. I would ask that those be entered into the record, but I'm not going to read them all. I also have additional appointments tonight to the Commission on Aging, Ela Kakade, to the Library Board, Nathan Robinson and Emily Zachary, and to the Police and Fire Commission, Jason Thompson. In addition to this, we have licenses in your committee to MPK Rock, That would be what some people call the speakeasy. Lisa Haas, combination beer and liquor license. This is to increase the serving area, and 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and sell and serve alcohol is in your packet. The banner for the United Way hanging over Water Street from September 10th to October 31st. The run walk from the Platteville Kiwanis, that is on Saturday, May 7th, starting at 9 o'clock. Street closing, this would be 2nd Street between Main and Furnace, and Mineral Street between Oak and 3rd for the Southwest Music Festival on Saturday, the 16th of July from 9 a.m. to midnight. And resolution 2208 to dissolve the complete count committee. This committee was formed just prior to the census to help inform citizens and others to complete their census forms. So that's the consent agenda, or consent agenda. Right here in motion.
I would like to, I have a question on the permits, no, the licenses, item number 1.
Okay, so you want to pull that one
I would
from,
like to have it.
okay. Are you making a motion for the rest then?
Well,
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda, all except for item D1. Do I hear a second?
Second,
Okay, Candace will vote.
Cop,
yes,
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now, Kathy, your question on the permit from 50/50 requesting outdoor premise space extension.
yes. My only question is, I remember when this first came up, my question is, were the neighbors notified that they are asking for an increased space outside?
Candace, do you want to take that?
I guess I don't know the answer to that as far as if both sides have been talked with about it. My understanding is, and they did go before the license committee with this as well, that the space that they're asking for is not necessarily going to add any people to that area. It's just going to make it so that they make it more complete, if that makes sense. They're, the way they explained it is there is on the, I guess it would be on the east side of their property, there is like a 2.5 foot drop that they are wanting to do something about and make it so that it's more of a complete space back there so that people aren't climbing through that area, is how they described it. The only addition that it sounds like this would include is there is a 2-seated, like a cafe table that is under their back porch area that people will often sit at, and they have to go over there and remind people not to sit there so that they are in the licensed premise area. And that's sort of what they were asking for, to include that space as well. So there is a photo.
Page 46.
Right,
Yeah.
it's in our packet.
Packet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can tell, the majority of the space is actually where the stairs are. So there's not going to be any seating underneath the steps or anything like that.
So there was no expansion on the west side of the property.
Okay,
And
Correct.
there, my recollection is there was conversation with the owners of the property to the east, and the owners to the property to the east didn't have any plans to take care of this drop off, and I didn't go back there and look at it, but they felt if they could somehow take care of that, that it was a safety factor, at least in some
Right.
instances.
So this, and if you look at the drawing here, it does not include It doesn't extend it anymore into the parking lot. So it doesn't take away any more parking lot that is already there and is being used as parking lot. That is going to remain. And my understanding is they have no interest to expand into the parking lot any further. And they indicated that to the, north end of those steps, right in front of that vehicle there, that's going to be a barrier of some sort. They haven't decided whether it's going to be matching what they already have there, or it was discussed about putting potted plants there just to kind of make that visible barrier so that people know not that that's where the premise stops. Does that help?
That's my only question.
Okay, are we ready then to take action, or are there additional questions on this premise extension? Otherwise, I'd take a motion for this. D1.
It's a motion to approve it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Jason to approve and D1, the license extension for 50/50. We'll vote. Candace?
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, then the first item in our agenda for action tonight is Resolution 2209, the DNR Stewardship Grant. Howard?
Thank you. This resolution would authorize the city manager to submit a DNR outdoor recreation grant application for our Mountain View Park trail and our Main Street Connector Trail project. We recently submitted applications for both those trails under the DOT grant program. And if those are approved, they are 80/20 grants. And if we also get the DNR grants, that would cover the remaining 20%. So the intent is it would cover design costs in 2023, construction costs in 2024 for the Mountain View Park Trail, and then similar 2024 and 2025 for the Main Street Trail. Staff is recommending approval of the resolution so that we are authorized to submit for this grant opportunity.
Okay, questions of Howard on this DNR stewardship grant? We've done this this was the way the trail was funded between Platteville and Belmont. It was 80% a TAP grant, Transportation Alternative Program, and then 20% a stewardship grant. So I know that when we passed the TAP grants originally, there was questions about how would we ever pay the 20%? Well, this may be the way to pay the 20%. Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
move to approve resolution 2209, authorizing submission of the DNR outdoor recreation grant applications.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ken and a second by Lynn. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss, Killian,
Yes.
Yes,
Nichols.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Okay, it appears that I forgot a part of the agenda. That was the citizens' comments, observations, and petitions. I have no green sheets, so maybe that's why I forgot that. But we do welcome again a student tonight who's here for his infrastructure class. So welcome, and we hope you enjoy yourself tonight. And then we had several minutes in the packets. The museum board.
Yes, I would like to remind everyone that May 1st is the reopening after a winter hiatus of the museum. And if you're a community resident, it is Community Free Day. So please come and see the museum. It's really wonderful. Lots and lots of great exhibits. You have questions, you can always go to the museum site on the website and check that out. But again, May 1st, which is Sunday. If you're a community resident, come on in and take a look.
Okay, community safe routes, Jason?
Nothing to add.
Police and fire, Kathy?
Nothing to add.
The library board, Lynn?
Nothing to add.
And the commission on aging, Kathy?
Nothing to add.
Okay, now we'll go back to action items. That's what a pro tem is for, to read the agenda and remind people that we actually have to do the whole thing. Okay, next we have resolution 22-10, designation of the official newspaper. And who is this? Candace.
I can take this. So this is we do this every year. We redesignate the official newspaper that the city of Platteville uses. We have this in place for a number of things. We have to post things, we have to publish things. Those items will include council minutes, notices to the public for things such as border review that is coming up. We will also do public hearing notices, job openings, quite a long list that we will submit to the paper. So this time around, the council asked or requested that the annual amount that the city spends towards advertisement and publications. So that figure is approximately $13,200. This does not include the cost for the actual subscription of the papers. That was a separate cost. It was further requested that staff also research various newspapers to compare the circulation numbers of each within the city of Platteville. So as you can see in the graphs that I broke down there for you, I separated them into paid papers, which would include the Platteville Journal, and these are just numbers that are within the city. So Platteville Journal, the Telegraph Herald, the Grant County Herald Independent, and the Tri-County Press. And then the free papers that are circulated within the city, which includes the shopping news, the reminder, and the roundup. At this time, staff is going to recommend assigning the Platteville Journal as the official newspaper for the city of Platteville. The Platteville Journal is a paid subscription newspaper that reaches the most people within the area.
Okay, questions or comments? Do I hear a motion?
Are the free papers options at all, or is that just information provided, like extra information provided? So I just know that I see that the circulation is considerably higher with those.
If we want to research that, I guess that we would have Candace research that for another year to see what the cost comparison be.
I was just thinking because one of the things that we've been talking about is just having more of a reach for residents, and with those reaching a lot more, it might be something to look at in the future.
Right. Do I hear any other questions or a motion?
I'm going to go with the Platteville Journal.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Kathy to assign the Platteville Journal as the official newspaper for the city of Platteville. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda is contract 13-22. This is the Roundtree Branch Stream Bank Restoration. How, it's hard to
Yes.
say that.
Yes, thank you. We're looking to do stream bank stabilization and restoration in 3 locations along the Roundtree Branch. Those 3 locations include the first one is both sides of the stream, up and downstream of the Trail Bridge and Fishing Pier by the Fiesta Cancun and Super 8 properties. We've had flooding and bank erosions. We want to protect the structures and minimize erosion in that area. Site 4 is what we've called it. It's along Valley Road, the outside bend of the stream near the Davison Water Plant. It was stabilized in 2011 when Valley Road was reconstructed. During one of our recent high water events, a section failed. We did an emergency repair there, and this would help stabilize that area. What we're calling Site 6 is along both sides of the stream at the Mineral Street Bridge. The bridge was installed in 2001, originally with an area for a trail to pass underneath. In 2014, we completed the trail project. As part of this, the way that bridge was designed, it was designed so that in high water events, the water will go onto that trail area. That's the natural overflow area. However, what ends up happening a lot is sediment ends up being deposited on the trail. It happens quite a bit, and we have a lot of wonderful volunteers, but it's a lot of work to scrape the trail of that mud. We would include a concrete apron to help direct that floodwater and sediment away from the trail in those areas. Low bidder is Rural Construction. They've done many different projects for us. Just as an aside, a couple of years ago, we did a similar project. We did similar projects, 2 areas on the university and 1 down by the Chamber of Commerce. So this is a similar type of a project with DNR funding. Now, half of the money is being paid for by the city through ARPA funding, and the other half through the DNR grant. Our low bidder was under budget, so the savings would be allocated to both sides. So staff is recommending award of this contract to Rural Construction for the bid price of $142,055. And if you have any specific questions about that, Dan Dressen is here to speak about any of the technical aspects if you have any of those questions.
Okay, questions about this stream bank stabilization program and awarding the contract?
I have 2 questions at least.
Dan, you wanna?
I believe it was the last time that you came in for projects like this, and we discussed about the height of the riprap going up the bank. And at that time, for those sites, you said you don't go up the whole distance up the bank.
That is correct. The DNR, their current, I'll say policy or interpretation of the rules of how of structural stabilization of banks is to have minimal riprap. So they are only allowing us to go up 1 to 2 feet above the normal water level. And then we have to cover that back up, and this is something new since the last time we did a project 2 years ago. We then have to cover that riprap back up with dirt and seed it.
Okay, then my next question is, with the increase in stream flow, with the increase in intensity of storms taking place in the last 2 years, do they now allow you to raise that height up higher? No? So they're not taking into account the increased flow?
No, unfortunately not. And we've had many discussions with the DNR about that, about increased flow and why we are requesting to put more riprap in. And we've requested in the past to put more riprap in because a lot of the Roundtree branch through the city of Platteville is not in its original location. So it's been moved. If you look at aerials from even like there's a 1940-ish aerial, and you can see where it meanders much more than it does now. It's pretty much been straightened out. And a lot of the way that they straightened it out, they used fill, and there's rock and concrete. And so it's hard to anchor any type of erosion matting into it, which is why we're even requesting the riprap. But they do not allow us to put any more riprap or raise it up at all or anything like that.
So you're controlled by DNR on this. You don't work at all with, say, Lancaster, Wisconsin,
No.
and they're putting in a rip.
No, they basically, what they do is we use their guidelines, the NRCS guidelines, but we have to then apply them to the DNR standards while trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish with the project.
Well, this seems like it's a situation where you're gonna be doing this thing over, because it looks like you're redoing one that was done in 2011.
Correct. And at that time, we use that as an example of why we have to put the riprap along the bottom. So we can, because what happened from the project from 2011 along Valley Road is because of what was there. In that particular stretch, the stream is pretty much on bedrock. And what we want to do is we want to take the matting and key it into the slope. Well, when you're keying into bedrock, it's very difficult to do. And plus there was fill. So what happened during the one large event is that it got underneath that material and started pulling it up. And then it caused slope failure. So we've used that as an example of why we want to put the riprap at the bottom of it to protect that erosion matting.
Okay,
To no
Thank you.
avail.
To not fail.
To no
Correct.
avail.
Yep.
And you just said now, new since 2 years ago, after you put the riprap in, you're going to have to put dirt over it and then seed it.
Correct. And that's due to the cricket frog. That's
Due to
present.
the cricket frog.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the
All
new
right,
standard for
so-
that.
All right, it's the cricket frog standard.
Yeah.
So I just have one question. If we have a flood event and it takes that soil and grass away, do we have to
No.
Okay. So you just have to do it one time.
Correct for that part. Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So much for the cricket frog.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions on this Roundtree Branch Stream Bank Restoration Contract? If not, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move to award contract 1322 Roundtree Branch Stream Bank repair to rural construction at the bid price of $142,055.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Kathy, second by Eileen to award contract 1322 to rural construction. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda are the 2021 budget carryover requests. This would be budget amendment 3. Nicola.
Yes. So as we talked about at the last meeting, and this is the time of year where we are finalizing our financial statements for the city. And at that time, we also review for any funds that were designated for a project that were not spent in 2021 and need to be carried over to 2022 in order for that project to complete. And that represents CIP projects. For carryovers for CIP, the projects being requested are City Hall exterior maintenance, which was begun in 2021 and will complete in 2022. The camera system server budget and the interview room camera system, which are being combined into the citywide camera system project for 2022. The train safety fence replacement, which was begun in 21 and will complete in 2022. And the campground improvements and expansion project also completing in 2022. The total of those projects requested carryover funds is $76,125. And there are additionally some requests to carry over some operating funds to the tune of $23,524 altogether. And that is made up of some unspent funds in administration, in the city manager budget, in police radio maintenance, and then a portion of the 2020 Friends contribution to the museum, which was supplemented in 2020 by 2 grants and was therefore approved to be carried over into 21 as seed money for a capital campaign. As the capital campaign did not take place in 2021, the $12,234 is being requested to carry forward into 2022 to supplement and therefore reduce the contribution from the Friends to the museums. And that would be down from $47,000 to $34,766. So any question on those carryover requests?
Questions on carryovers? Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the carryover of 76, sorry, my printer's too small, $76,125 in the CIP fund and $23,524 in the general fund per the attached schedule.
Second.
A motion by Eileen, second by Jason to approve these two carryovers, one for the general fund and one for the CIP. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, that concludes the action items on our agenda tonight. Now we'll move into information and discussion. The first of these is an ordinance about lead service line replacement. Howard.
Yes, thank you. What we have here is a draft ordinance to require the replacement of all lead service line for water services within the city of Platteville. Water and Sewer Commission provided guidance to staff to prepare an ordinance for consideration. Back in 2017, when we were first starting our grant funding requests, the commission declined to consider an ordinance, hoping that we could encourage homeowners to use the grant program. In that time, we've replaced 489 lead water service lines. We have approximately 140 remaining, 3 of whom are ineligible for the DNR grant funding because there's no residential component to the structure. New regulations from federal EPA and the Wisconsin DNR requires any water utility that has at least one lead service line to perform mandatory sampling and optimization of chemical treatments to minimize the amount of lead that leaches into the water supply. The way to avoid this additional expense is to ensure the removal of all lead service lines. The DNR grant program does have preferences for communities that have ordinances. Staff reviewed sample ordinances and come up with this sample. We are recommending the deadline be December 31st, 2024. It's a little over 2 years away. And the reason for that is that we are required right now to do what they call a corrosion control study. And that study has to be completed and presented to the DNR in January of 2023. DNR reviews that, and then they tell us what optimization techniques we need to use. And in many cases, that will add expenses to the water and sewer utility. We have 24 months from the date that they send that letter in order to do that. So the earliest that they could do it, if they turned it right around, would be January 2025. So that's why we're recommending December 31st, 2024, so that regardless of when they actually review and put out the letter, we would have all lead service lines removed. And at that time, we would tell them that we've certified it, and then it becomes moot. We would not be
And we-
required to do any of that extra expense.
Then we would not be required to do this chemical treatment and all of these additional tests.
That's correct.
So the idea at Water and Sewer was, let's match up the ordinance with the timeline that DNR has proposed, so that by the time we would have to do that, we can guarantee that all the lead service lines have been replaced.
Correct.
Now, we have had grant money and we do have grant money now.
Correct.
Homeowners have been able to get 15?
The maximum allowance is $1,140, which we had figured was roughly 75% of the average cost. For some, it's more, for some, it's less.
So to this point, we've asked for voluntary compliance, but very soon in 2026, this will start costing everyone more money if there's even one lead service line left. Plus, it will add more chemicals to our water. So questions of Howard?
Just a clarification, I noticed that this gives you the authority then to discontinue the service if people don't comply.
That's correct.
And it's still illegal in the city to occupy a residence that doesn't have water service, correct?
We've changed our policies on that, and those properties become placarded as uninhabitable.
So, okay, very well. That's all. Thanks.
Kathy?
Howard, of the 140 that are still out there, do people actually know that they have lead pipes?
Yes.
Or have they all been, I mean, they
Yes.
all know it. They
As
it's-
recently as last month, when we received the grant award for this year, we sent out letters to the owners of those properties, advising them that they should come forward and request grant money. Yeah, we have up to 50, enough money for up to 50 of them this year. And depending on the ordinance and the grant availabilities, DNR puts preferences on those communities who have ordinances, but also those who are going to guarantee that they're requesting money to remove all of them. Now, as I said in this item, there are at least 3 known properties with lead service lines that do not have a residential component on that property. They're business only, and those are not eligible for the DNR grant.
They would still have to have the.
But according to this, they would need to remove those.
And the average cost, I heard you say the 1,100 and that's 75%. So it's like a couple $1,000 for replacement.
About
Is that
1,500, give or
15?
take.
total to have it replaced?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
it depends on
ballpark.
the specific circumstances at each individual property. If you're in a house that's closer to the street, and so your line doesn't have to be as long, then it may cost less. If it's a longer distance, or if it's in a driveway and you have to replace concrete or do something like that, it'll cost more.
Okay, additional questions. Howard, would it be fair? I think Water and Sewer also indicated that in the event that this ordinance is adopted, that additional information will be sent to those with lead service lines that say you now have until December, whatever, to take it out because now it's mandated. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So they've been informed that the program does exist, but in the event that this ordinance passes, they will get a second letter that says it has to happen now.
And Howard, it
Some
would be
have
up to the-
waited.
Huh?
Some people have waited because they know, for example, like we have our Cedar Street project this year. Some have decided to wait and do it in conjunction with our street project. So it's not that some of these people are recalcitrant or anything else. They're just trying to coordinate it a little bit easier to minimize disruption. So I would expect that a good number of those will come in. Sorry.
The other thing I was just going to note is it's up to the property owner to contact a plumber to actually have the work done. The city doesn't do that.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions about the lead service line replacement ordinance? And we'll move on to resolution authorizing execution of the Department of Natural Resources Principal Forgiveness Financial Assistance Agreement. And this is really to get the money for the lead service line replacement program. It's a long
Yes.
title.
Yes, this is the resolution for that DNR grant money that we've just been talking about. I made a mistake earlier back in January, and I jumped the gun. And so this is corrected with a correct project number and the amount of the award.
Any questions on this? Okay, then both of these will be moved to action for our next meeting. Next, we have the employee handbook update.
Yeah.
Adam.
So during the first quarter of 2022, Human Resource Specialist Chad Wilson was tasked with reviewing potential updates which could be made to the City of Platteville Employee Handbook. The last revision to the handbook occurred in December 2021. That's where the Common Council passed the changes in regards to the vacation and also the observance of additional floating holidays. So those now have actually been incorporated into this. So what you have in front of you is, after reviewing the documents with department directors, the following proposed changes have been made. So number one, there were updates made to pronoun usage throughout the entire document. As part of the City of Platteville pledging to become a more inclusive community, all references of he, she, his, or her have been removed and replaced with they, their, them, and themselves. Updated various recommended Microsoft Word Office changes regarding punctuation, spelling, et cetera, throughout the document. So that's just something that Microsoft Word does for you. So we're looking at making those changes. Number three, we updated appropriate contact for various inquiries to recognize the presence of now the human resource position. Page 7, we made some changes to the personal file access, has been updated to include the addition of the human resource specialist duties and responsibilities. Page 8, same thing with background checks. Background checks have been updated to include the addition of the human resource specialist duties and responsibilities. Page 14 now has been updated to include the floating holiday changes from 16 to 32 hours. Page 15 now has the new vacation table, which was updated to the new parameters based on approval from the Common Council. Page 17, unused sick leave upon termination. Verbiage was added to clarify that employees must have worked for the city for at least 7 years to qualify for payout of unused sick leave. It previously read as either retiring from employment or working at least 7 years. Page 18 was a footnote. We removed the footnote. This no longer applied to any current employees. Page 19, funeral leave was, we removed step sibling from 1 day of approved leave to 3 days of approved leave based on the City of Platteville's pledge to again be more inclusive. Page 20, special leave of absence with or without pay, verbiage removed for clarity purposes. Page 23, overtime, we added dispatch employee language to include their work schedule as it's different from other employees. Page 29, harassment and respectable behavior, we added the word prevention to accurately reflect the name of the policy. Page 53, responsibility of all employees and office holders. Adhering was added to the sentence to make it clearer to employees the items listed in this section. So again, there is really no budgetary impact currently to this document. Some of the other things we'll also be doing is updating the logo on here, because obviously when this was done in 2019, we didn't have to make the logo changes, so we'd be looking to do that. So what we'd be asking council members to do in preparation for the next meeting is kind of look this over. If you have any corrections or additional things you would like to see in there, please let me know, and then I will kind of work with our human resource specialists on making those changes.
It's quite an extensive book. Any questions, comments? Kathy?
I do. Adam, if you're going to be looking through that,
Yeah.
is there, I didn't see it, but is this an appropriate place? I would think, the city does do annual employee reviews, correct?
Yes, so that is something that wouldn't technically be in the handbook, but we have that in a
But that's-
administrative
okay.
policy. Correct.
Would the same be, that employees need or should be advised that when they leave employment with the city, there will be an exit?
Yes, so
interview?
that's also an administrative policy that we have as well.
Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Yep.
Other questions? Ken?
I started looking at this. I did about the first 10 pages. That's as far as I got out of the 60. And also I did some of Appendix D. So the first one seems like a little trivia, but it's on, and I'll go through a couple of these.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
And I have a copy that has larger print versus the print that's in the hard copy I got from Colette. So I think it's page 8, residency. Under residency, the 2, 3, the third line, it says, for example, the police chief must live within 15 road miles of city limits.
Mhm.
So that the word road was put in there. Then you go down to second to last line, it says there, once the employee chooses to leave the grandfather residence, they must live within 15 miles of the city limits. Should that also read road miles?
Yes.
So then my next question is, I call it page 9.
Yep.
And it starts with second paragraph, the city expects employees. And you put, you've taken out the word problems and you put problems back in. Was the purpose just to underline it? That was the only reason?
Subsection A.
He's looking at.
Is that page
Page
10?
Just
if we're in the
Just
packet?
right above grievances. There's many places where the word has been crossed out. And I think a comma was inserted.
Yes.
I think that that's predominantly a comma insertion to resolve any questions, comma, problems,
Yep.
comma, or misunderstandings. I think there was no comma after problems.
Yes.
before. So I think that was a punctuation.
So that's a punctuation
So it's
change.
just the comma, no underline.
Right,
Is that correct? No
right.
underline.
No underline.
Correct.
And the same would be,
The same thing would be on the next paragraph,
next
which is the
paragraph
city
is
reserves all rights. It got rid of rights and now has a comma after it.
so they used, I suspect they used grammar check
Yes.
in Microsoft Word, and grammar check went through and corrected these grammatical or what
Yep.
that program saw as grammatical
Correct.
errors. Right.
What it recommends you should change.
So my next one that I want to comment on is step 1, page 10.
Okay.
And it says the employee must prepare and file a written grievance with their department director within 10 business days of when the employee knows or should have known of the events giving rise to grievance. I believe that 10 days is insufficient. And myself, I'm recommending 120 days. I believe 10 days, for example, let's just take an example, assault. Assault, the person may be very unwilling to do something within 10 days, knows about it, unwilling to do it. So my comment is, I think the time needs to be lengthened. And then I have some other ones.
So a grievance would be different than a claim of harassment.
Right.
So I think that a grievance would,
But later on in D, you need to start reading D with this
reading D.
appendix D.
Oh, okay.
So that's where I left off. The next one I have is just, I was beginning on this one, and this is page 10, step 3. The impartial hearing officer review. And it says the city of Platteville shall select the impartial hearing officer. And it says, my question is, who's going to select that person? Is that the city manager? City of Platteville. So that's whoever is eligible in the city of Platteville to do it. That's the city manager.
So typically, if we are looking for an impartial officer to review something, by that point, we are probably getting legal guidance, which normally then they will determine to either be, in some instances, it could be the council president. In some incidents, it could be an outside source. So normally that's typically what that would mean. If we're going outside and looking for a impartial officer, that's probably where I'm getting legal guidance on what that would mean, or we would have to consider that.
I have a comment on that. The grievant shall be given the opportunity to review the background, credentials, and experience of the impartial hearing officer.
You're looking to add that. Is that what you're saying?
I'm looking to add that. So
Sure.
we'll bring it up next time.
Yeah. So yeah,
I think the person that is bringing a grievance should know who he, she, they, or whatever we're going to use there,
Right.
are working with.
yeah. And I think with this, we just tried to look at, these were kind of some bare bones or quick changes that could be made. I think the ones you're bringing up, Ken, are the ones that probably need to have a bit more discussion in regards to if we want to, if we're talking about changing timelines and things, those are things probably that we want to have more in-depth conversation with staff. And then also I think the council.
So is it Chad that took the lead on this?
Yes. Well, it was a combination of the three of us. So Chad obviously started, and then he met with Nicola and myself, and we kind of looked over the
So
proposed
Ken, have you
changes.
met Chad?
Yes, but
HR?
I've not talked about this.
Right.
So I might suggest that would be a good
Mhm.
thing to talk, that you should talk through these changes or your suggestions with Chad. Because if we go through all 166 pages.
Well, and we did do that when this, back in 2019, when the council accepted this policy. At that time, we did go through everything with a fine tooth comb, as they say where I'm from. And what was being brought forward now was just a series of updates. So it was actually the intent of staff that the council would consider the updates, but not the entire handbook, because those places that have not been updated were reviewed by the council and accepted by the council in 2019. And so we don't see that there's a need to go through those sections again.
Although if Ken has suggestions.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I think that it would be appropriate, Ken, for you to voice those suggestions to Chad to be vetted and discuss if there's actual substantive change. A
Right.
lot of the change that has been put in here is more
Grammatical or
housekeeping
Right.
change, I guess I would say, versus substantive change.
but
But I think under D, my impression of D is that there is considerable substance that needs to be changed. Now, I went through this years ago,
Correct.
and we just kind of did a general go through.
Sure.
That was it.
So for substantive change of this nature, I think that the place to start
Yeah.
then, Ken, and maybe Adam, you can help Ken get a meeting scheduled with Chad.
Yep. Yeah, we can definitely
to,
sit down, the three of us, and kind of
discuss
go
the,
over.
substantive change.
I suggested to Adam that the three of us meet. and
Yes.
go through it.
Yep.
Good
So
plan.
I'll stop right here because I have more here.
Okay. And then if that can't happen before the next meeting, Adam,
Yeah.
then maybe we would delay this
Yes.
to the second meeting in May instead of.
Yep.
So I would say that we won't expect to see the employee handbook update back on the agenda.
Right.
For the
Until
May
the,
10th meeting, maybe the May, whatever the next 24th.
Correct.
Be it. Okay. All right, then, and if anybody else has any
Mhm.
updates that they think they would like to see in terms of substantive change, again, please reach out to
Yeah.
Adam.
I mean, Todd, you're a new set of eyes, so take a look at it and let us
Yep.
know what you think.
Okay, let's move on then to the next agenda item which is the loan extension for 25 East Main Street. Joe,
Yes, back in 2015, the city and the RDA both approved loans for the property at 25 East Main Street. There were some interior and exterior building renovations, adding some apartments to the basement, which weren't there before. So these were, the RDA's loan was for $80,000 at 1% interest with a 7-year balloon payment, and it was amortized over 20 years. Those funds came from the RDA's funds directly. The city also did a loan. At that time, it was a $172,000 loan, 3% interest, 7-year balloon payment. It amortized over 20 years. The current balance on the, on the RDA loan is about $54,000. On the city loan is about $124,000. The RDA's, as I mentioned, loans, those funds came from their own internal funding source. The city did the pass-through loan. We borrowed the money from Fidelity Bank and Trust. At that point, it was at 1.98%, and then we turned around and reloaned it to L&L 3%. So these balloon payments are due in May. So the applicant is interested in extending the payment of those loans. We had the actual loans for an additional 2 years, so the loans can be paid down, hopefully adequate point, so that they can be refinanced into the overall debt on that property with the private lender. So they're confident that an additional 2 years will allow that to happen. The RDA considered their item at their meeting last night and did approve a 2-year extension at the same terms. So the council needs to consider the extension of the original 172,000 loan. The city did already receive an extension of 2 years from Fidelity Bank and Trust for the loan that we had borrowed from them. Slightly higher rate than it was before. Originally it was 1.98%. Now it's 3.25%. But essentially it's a similar setup, amortized over 170 payments, but actually be making 23 payments with a balloon payment due April 2024. So the intent with that, both loans would essentially coincide with 2-year balloon payments. Which, as I mentioned, the hope is that by that point, the loans could be refinanced and incorporated into the private mortgage that's on the property. Judy Wall, the representative from Elman Investments, is here this evening. If you have any questions for her, and she did provide, it was in your packet, some updated loan and mortgage and rent collection information. That should be in your packet anyway.
Judy, you want to come to the podium? Okay, questions, comments? This is the building on Main Street. Currently, your tenant is modern backyards.
Madam, back roads.
Modern.
Both.
And then are all your apartments rented right now?
Yes.
And are all of them completed? So how many
Yes.
apartments?
So we have 5 total apartments, but they're among all of them, there would be 10 beds. So one is rather large with 4 bedrooms.
Okay. And so are all the apartments upstairs?
Yes. Oh, no, there are 2 in the below the storefront in the basement level.
So there's 2 below the storefront.
Right.
And then there's 2 on the second floor and 1? Or?
One is a 2-story, and then there's 2 on the second floor, and then the second story of the one on the 3rd floor plus another one on the 3rd floor.
Okay, questions?
I have some questions. So just for clarification, the city, what concerns me is the documentation here about budget and fiscal impact. So it says if the city is liable for the debt, if LMN fails to make the required payments. So we're asking for a 1% higher interest rate. I guess I have a comment. I wasn't part of the council, obviously, when this was approved. And I guess I'm was not a fan of hearing that the city was in the loan business for developing like this. And now I'm concerned that they're asking for a 2-year extension. The property is assessed at 224,000 and the private loan has a current value of $405,651. How does that work?
Are you asking me? The property, we have a development agreement that assesses the property at 378,000. And so the city bills us for the difference between what the assessor has the property assessed at and the 378.
So Kathy, there was a guaranteed valuation on the property. And if the assessor values the property at less than that, and we have other properties that have had this happen too. So then the property owner pays as if it were assessed at the value that they guaranteed. I mean, I know we have other properties in that regard. I
Yes.
think actually Park Place, when Park Place and the Assisted Living Center were developed in the former Southwest Hospital, they guaranteed a certain amount of tax, a certain amount of assessment, and the assessor didn't assess the property at that, but they paid as if it was assessed at that. So that's one way. Judy, you had financing that you thought would come from historic tax credits. Did you ever get your tax credit payments?
Yes, we did. And the money has been reinvested in the property.
Has been reinvested in this
Yes.
property. Okay. So we know that assessed value and selling price don't necessarily have a relationship. Is that right? Would that, is
Yep.
that what you would say? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to enter into a development agreement where if you're unsure of, and especially if you're rehabilitating a particular property, it is not uncommon to, instead of, bank on exactly what it's going to be, that you come to an agreement saying, okay, in order to make sure the loan is able to be paid, we want to guarantee that whatever we as the city are taking debt on, you're going to pay on this amount regardless. So even if it's assessed more, that's in your favor. If it's assessed less, that's the risk that, we as the city in giving a loan want to have some safety net. Now, the downfall is just as you indicated, Kathy, that is a factor that can play into it, is if for whatever reason that development doesn't work or goes defunct, then the city is responsible for that. And then it would be our responsibility to pay it and then get it back onto the market.
Additional questions?
Was your business affected by COVID?
Yes, so just for those council members that haven't been familiar with the project, the building, when I was approached to purchase it, had the facade separating from the actual building. So all the masonry had to be reestablished and tied back together. It was a complicated project for a small building, which entered into a higher level of risk because you don't have the revenue that you would have coming in from a larger building when you have expenses that are bigger. So we did not start accruing rental revenue until 2019, the fall of 2019. And then following that, we hit COVID, and we did have some tenants that just, bailed on their leases, basically, because they were operating from home. And the 4-bedroom apartment specifically had issues with keeping people in it. But for the most part, that the reason I'm asking for the extension is to acquire a little more equity in the property before I think that I could succeed with taking those 2 second mortgages to the bank to have them move it into one loan, move it into the first mortgage.
And you purchased the building in 2017,
2015.
2015.
Mhm.
So it was almost 4 years before you
It took-
could.
Yeah, it took a long time.
Okay, any other questions? And then we'll move this to action for our next meeting. Next, we have contract 8-22 highway painting. Howard.
Yes, thank you. We do an annual center line and pavement markings on some of our highways and other major streets. This year is the turn for South Chestnut and Marquee. Those were originally painted in 2010. Normally epoxy lasts 5 to 7 years, so we've done pretty well with that. This contract would repaint those items. Just for people's edification, painting for our mill and overlay project will be done in conjunction with the culvert replacement project because it's right there. I did put in one alternate bid for the dashed yellow line on the bike path. We received a bid from one firm, Century Fence. They've done good work for us in the past. Budget was 30,000. The base bid came in over budget. And so with the alternate, it's way over budget. The major price item that increased was for crosswalks. There are a number of crosswalks on this project. So what I'm basically recommending that we do is we award the base bid only, and then I remove the crosswalk at Ready Drive. The anticipated budget with Ready Drive crosswalk removed is in the neighborhood of $29,000. I don't have the number with me, but it would be below the budgeted amount.
Questions? So Ready Drive, there are no sidewalks on Ready Drive, right?
What this is it's the crosswalk for the pathway that, and so there's a painted crosswalk that goes across the end of Ready Drive for the continuation of the pathway on the west side of Chestnut Street. If you look, there's the map. It may be hard to,
I think the map,
it may be hard to see, but you can see the trail going down the west side of the road. And so what ends up happening is when Chestnut and Marquee were redone back in 2010, there was a crosswalk painted so that people who are on the trail would use that crosswalk to cross Ready Drive. And I'm just saying, let's remove that one from painting this year in order to stay within the budget. Because it's not used as often, plus Ready Drive is a less traffic street. The ones, in the roundabout itself and the ones up at the top at the north end by Southwest Road are more critical.
are we striping the crosswalk that didn't we approve a crosswalk on South Chestnut from the parking lots across from to the east of Roundtree Commons?
Yes, but I was not planning on doing that portion. What I meant by South Chestnut is technically the road from the roundabout out to Business 151 is also South Chestnut. Marquee only goes from the roundabout north to Southwest Road. So we were not planning on doing painting outside of the roundabout going north on that section of Chestnut
Okay.
Street.
Other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then this one will also be moved to action for next meeting. And now we'll go to item F, the 2023-2026 considerations for the bipartisan infrastructure law grants for transportation.
Correct.
Question before we
Okay.
start.
Go ahead, Ken.
My question is this gonna come back next time?
The highway painting or the,
No. the
or
next-
this bill
the
project?
Next thing.
This one that we're getting ready to discuss.
Yep.
The intent is that we would bring this back as a work session item next time, so that we could go through it in more detail, ask a lot more questions. My hope is that as a result of that work session, that you provide guidance whether or not to, do the ones that I'm recommending, do different ones, so that I can have enough time to finish the actual grant writing and submission.
Because the grant is due June the 1st.
Correct.
All right, so we only have the month of May to act on this. So if it comes back in a work session at the May 10th meeting, then it would have to come back for action at the May 24th meeting. And then the timeline for Howard to prepare all this, I mean, when it comes back for action on the 24th, it has to be pretty.
Needs to be done.
It needs
Yeah.
to be complete. So this is really, if we're going to apply for this money and have any chance to get any of this money, I
We're
guess
gonna have a consensus on the
we're gonna
24th.
have to plow through this.
Yeah, I was, my intent was to at least give an introduction, answer any brief questions, but then do the slogging at the next time during a
Right.
work session.
And what if council members have read this list and they said, but how about road ABC? That's not on your list.
Right.
How to,
I want to add something.
that's
That's
what I
fine.
figured.
That's
That's what
I'm here to try to,
that's what I tried to say.
yes,
How about
that's what I'm
ABC
trying
that's not on
to,
the list?
that's what I'm trying to get is input so that, we can discuss them maybe in more detail at our next meeting and hopefully give me the consensus of where we want to go with this.
Okay, and a couple of items. You gave an example of costs on just one. So is there, for lack of a better word, is there a target amount? Or could we apply, I mean, can we have roads in the neighborhood of 60 million? I mean, is there an idea that, we don't want to go above 10 or we shouldn't go above 15? Or is there any parameter in terms of how many projects we should submit? And then I notice it's only for the road construction and the storm sewer. So any water and sewer that's done has to be funded through rate increases in water and sewer, because it's not eligible for this grant money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
I mean, water and sewer, there are loan programs and such through the DNR.
But this is a grant program, which is a
Well,
little bit
this-
different than.
This one's an
loan.
80-20 grant, yes.
Right, but it's a little bit different than a loan program. So
True.
in these, we wouldn't have to pay back 80%. In the water and sewer, we would be funding 100%.
Right.
Either directly or through loans or bonding. Okay, so I think it's important that people know as we go through this, that it doesn't necessarily cover everything.
Yeah.
Right.
There are two kinds of projects. One is what they call the surface transportation urban, which are those collectors and above, the major streets. On that second map, this one that has the colors on it, that's the one that this is for. And this is where the bulk of the money at the state goes towards
Is
the STPU program. And we can divide it out and parse it out a little bit for each different year and different things like that.
Are those the green roads on your map?
Yeah, the green and red and the yellow mustard or whatever you want to call it on this map that's in the packet.
That's
Any of these roads except for the state highways are eligible for this.
Submission period.
They're eligible for this.
The STPU.
That's
STP.
called STP Urban, STP.
Okay, the
You.
first one you have is East Main Street.
Correct.
So myself, I'm interested in doing that one, but I need to know the amount. So this is, but there are questions about it, such as you're working next to the fire station, the old fire station.
Correct.
And you're going underneath a building, which is 250 East Main. And
We
that
wouldn't
building,
necessarily go underneath the building.
there's a tube underneath it.
Correct.
Okay.
The idea would be that we would block off that waterway that goes underneath
Okay,
the
but
building and relocate it so that it does no longer goes under the
Okay,
building.
but a few years back, the owner of that property came here and said that you have eroded my pillars, away from my pillars for this particular building. So we're going to be facing that situation. What has the city done about protecting that property against further damage? What is the city's liability? So that was brought up sometime past. Probably no one on the council knows about this, except maybe Eileen and Barb. So that may be a potential cost. Also, another thing that came up is that Gladys Kinsley was always talking about the hillside that was eroding, and that was the hillside formed by the old shopping nose. And right now you can see some of the concrete pillars, placements, or whatever you put in front of cars, those are falling off, and part of that area is falling off. So I think there are things involved here that you have to keep in mind. Another thing is the timing. How will this be affected as far as the fire station? Will you be able to work on this going across the street with the fire station still there? Is that what you're planning to do?
Not necessarily. I
Or you're
mean,
gonna put it
this time window is for obligation of funds from
Up to 26.
through September 30th, 2026. So, as long as a project is designed and they bid it out in August or September of 2026, then it can be constructed in 2027 using those same funds. I'm
Okay.
hopeful that we'll be in a new fire station by then, but we'll have to see.
That's my question on timing.
Okay, let's let Howard go through these so that, I
Well,
mean,
this is a big one,
this is a big one, I agree.
so I'm finished with the big
But the big one,
project.
okay.
Okay. Like I say, this first batch are some for what I call the STP urban, the special ones. There's more money for
How much
that.
more money?
Um,
Is this 80/20? Is this?
this is 80/20.
No, no. How much of the allocation is STPU versus STPL? Have they told you that?
They have estimates only, but they're talking more than double, if I remember right, for the STP urban versus the STP local.
Okay.
I
Okay,
would
that's
have to
fine.
get the dollar amounts and all. But I'm proposing 3 different streets. One, as we discussed, East Main Street between Water and Broadway. The grant monies would support basically relocating that large storm sewer underneath with maybe a little bit of a head wall on the north end, but not very much more. It would not include any work on the bank on the east side, much beyond where the water would go underneath the road. But that's one issue that I really think we should be looking at doing. Camp Street between Lancaster and Holman. That one, there have been a number of documented water breaks. And so, as a major traffic collector for Westview School, I think that needs full reconstruction. Greenwood Avenue between College and Longhorn. That's the only section that did not get reconstructed. We had the original construction in '64 and overlaid in 2012. That there's been one water main break, but the water main there is undersized. We have that short block of 6-inch water main in between 2 10-inch water mains. 10-inch water main on the west side from College Drive, and we did pipe bursting in 2009 through the campus with a 10-inch water main that basically ended at the intersection of Greenwood and Longhorn Drive. So those are 3 that I looked at and said those are good candidates. The other program is our Surface Transportation Local, STPL. All the other roads, about 2/3 of our roads, fall under that category. I have a number of those. The problem is that for the 2022 projects, it was about 170 million statewide for that local program. I think it's somewhere around 200 million a year for 23 through 26 for this STP local statewide. It sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking all municipalities under 50,000 population in the state of Wisconsin, it doesn't go very far. But just to kind of give you some considerations, Knollwood subdivision, the original part of Knollwood subdivision, Knollwood Way, Hillcrest and Highbury, constructed in the 80s. We've had a number of water main breaks, a number of them in the last few years. The last one that we had shows severe external corrosion of the ductile iron water main pipe. There's a wall thickness and it's basically corroding, and that wall is just not there anymore. And that's what a lot of that's happening. So I'm looking at doing something there. There are some other considerations for the sewer main and things like that. And we have that one large culvert that goes underneath Knollwood Way that could use a little attention. Another area that I'm looking at is the West Madison, Jewett Street, 7th Avenue area between Elm and Lancaster. Those were last constructed in the 1960s. And between those streets, there have been 13 water main breaks, with over half of them in the last 5 years in that area between, West Madison and Jewett, between Elm and Lancaster, and then the piece of 7th between that. Sunset Drive, it was reconstructed in 1968. There have been 4 water main breaks in the last 5 years. One was on a slope that required a large amount of repaving. Storm sewer on the north-south section is behind the street, underneath the driveways. It's corrugated metal pipe. It's failing, and we've had it fail and cause undermining of driveways along that stretch in the last few years. 7th Avenue between Camp and Ridge. It's technically on our CIP for reconstruction in 2026. This would be one way of merging our existing CIP with this grant program. Street was last reconstructed in 1973, and at least 4 water main breaks in the last 10 years. Mound View Drive, similar, many water main breaks. Roundtree Avenue, very old street with a few water main breaks. That's why I submitted that map with the polka dots for water main breaks over the last few years. The reason why I did this by talking about the examples is, for Knollwood subdivision, the city would still be on the hook for $700,000. The question becomes a budgetary question: do we end up adding it to our existing CIP? Do we take streets away from our existing CIP in order to fund these? Those are some of the questions that we'll need to kind of walk through as we're going through the budgeting process. So I'm hoping that we can come to a consensus on which projects, what sort of priorities we want these, so that I can submit the grant proposals.
All right, you've seen, or you've heard the streets that Howard has identified. Ken, you have a couple more you want to identify?
Just mainly one, and that's Gridley Avenue. This year we will do Gridley, part of Gridley starting at Chestnut, is that correct? And going over to Hickory. Gridley itself there isn't in too bad a condition. Now, if you go to the next Gridley, which is from Chestnut to Staley, that looks pretty good. Then you go from the next Gridley, which is Staley to Straw Avenue. It looks pretty good. Then you cross Harrison Park and you go from South Court to Roundtree Avenue. That portion is in poor condition. So my main interest is that Gridley be checked as far as what needs to be done, and that there be a minor project, be a minor project to complete Gridley as far as the fact that part of Gridley, this one block, has the worst construction in that whole area. In fact, I'll say this, that Gridley Street at that block between Court Street and Roundtree is probably the worst block as far as in all the area from going from Water Street to Pine Street to Hickory Street. So it's a minor project, and basically to me, it's simply milling of Gridley Street from South Court to Roundtree Avenue. I will not spend more time talking about this. I could talk about it about a half a page if you want more information. This street was built in 1969, and this street I would describe when they built Gridley in this part in South Court, I would describe it as a poor design, poor construction, and now it needs maintenance.
I will
Any
I will
other
put it-
streets, Ken?
in for consideration.
I'm just looking at that area up the Pine.
Anybody else with any other streets in your own neighborhood or in an adjacent neighborhood or across town?
I just want to make a comment, Howard. As far as your proposal here, your suggestions, I think they're very well thought out. And I could almost agree to this now. Do have some little questions with it, each of them, but this, I like this to see it has helped, especially with the number of water main breaks, because the criteria you could use is just, well, if the street was built in 1960, hasn't had any issues, but you have one over here that has all these breaks, it really helps the priority identification. So I appreciate that.
That's why we keep them around.
So I have a question. Why wouldn't we submit the CIP projects that we have for the next 3 years instead of submitting other projects? Why wouldn't we take the CIP projects we have on the deck? Because we're going to have to pay 20% anyway. And instead of identifying different projects, this is just a question. Why wouldn't we submit the CIP projects that we've already prioritized as important? And instead of, I mean, we know that we have traditionally borrowed $1 million or $1.2 million. This would, why don't we, for lack of a better word, double up those projects or triple up those projects if it allowed, and push those CIP projects forward that we've already talked about? Because if we have those in our CIP budget, I think you already, you raised the question, and that's why I'm raising this question, because you already said we have these CIP projects, but we're going to have to pay 20%. So then the question is, where are we going to get the 20%? So maybe somebody can help me understand why we would identify new and additional projects instead of taking the projects we've already identified and doubling and tripling them up to try to make sure we can do these projects that we've identified.
I can certainly look at that.
I mean,
We need to look at the timing on all of that. And yeah, that's one possibility. And I'll be looking at some of those items, but the STPU urban ones, we don't have any of those currently on our docket. So
those would have to be new if we were going to go for that grant program.
So to me, this needs to be a kind of a comprehensive picture.
Yep.
It needs to be a comprehensive picture of not only what we're submitting, but how that fits into the CIP and where we've taken a CIP program, kind of what was prioritized as the CIP
Yep.
and worked it in here. And if it can't be an STPU or what STPL or whatever, how we maneuver those, because, we want to get these grants and then we don't want to we don't want to be down the road with doing this project, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, now we're gonna,
Pivot.
pivot and do some other projects. So to me, it looks like you need to look at the whole thing. The other thing that concerns me, obviously, is the water and sewer costs. I mean, we've already upped the water rates this year and upped the sewer rates this year. And it's like, how many, a 1.5 million, I mean, we have to borrow the money or we have to get grants and pay it back or whatever. It's borrowing and it means we're going to pay it back. Todd?
I was just gonna say, we won't be able to afford to take a shower if they keep going up.
Whoa. Ken?
Okay. My question is, as far as the CIP projects that we've listed for the next years, how much of the engineering use or engineering design has been done so far? Any idea?
Very little.
Very little. So as far as CIP versus these things, we're probably 0 to 0 as far as how much has been
Pretty
designed.
close.
So we have to come up with a cost for each of these things to decide.
Mhm.
So by next time, we have to know general cost for each of these things then.
And then we need to go back to the CIP and see what we said we were going to do.
Sure.
And then we have to decide, why is it that we're not going to do that? And now we're going to do this because 5 months ago, that was really important, but now all of a sudden it's not important.
In my mind, they're all important.
Well, I
The-
understand.
The issue is, what can we afford?
Right.
Right.
And that's, ideally, we would be able to afford both, but realistically, no,
Right.
I know we can't. And
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to come to that consensus agreement as to how to make that work. The one thing that I will caution you is that when I come back with those numbers for, say, Jefferson Street, that's in our CIP for next year, I'm going to end up having to add 25 to 30% onto what's in the current budget projection. And I'm not talking about the inflation factor. I'm talking about DOT. DOT, because of the requirements that come with DOT money, you need to add at least 25 to 30% onto what it would normally cost to do a project. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the way it is. If we're doing it ourselves, we
I-
don't.
I understand that, but we can only spend $1 once. And if we got
Yep.
$50,000, that's what or $500,000, that's what we got. And so it becomes a balancing act.
Yes. Just
Okay. I think that's it for our agenda tonight, except I forgot to mention that the most recent copy of 53818 is out. It was in your shopping news today, or maybe yesterday if you got it yesterday, or maybe tomorrow if you get it tomorrow. But make sure and take a look at your 53818. And we thank Jody for all of her work on this. Want to give a shout out to you, Jody, for doing this. So didn't want to forget. So now I would take the one motion that we still need to.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, motion by Kathy and a second by Lynn to adjourn. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols. Motion carries.